Retirees don't go broke overnight. It's normally a bunch of small mistakes that build up over time. With a retirement that lasts anywhere from 10 to 40 years, you can see why it becomes something that it's very important to get things right. When you're talking about retirement mistakes, I'm going to go over the 10 most common retirement mistakes. I'm going to share with you a document that I put together. And if you're interested in the document, you can always go to happily-retire.com. I'll put a link in the show notes for you. So when you're talking about the 10 biggest retirement mistakes that people make, you can see that the first mistake is just ignoring the wisdom of experience. I'm someone who believes wisdom is like the best thing that you can have. That wisdom is almost the ability to ask for more wishes. I remember reading the Bible growing up and how King Solomon, he was sitting there and God was like, I'll give you anything that you want. And when he asked for his wish, he said, and that was in my kid mind, like a genie asking for a wish, but he had said, I would like wisdom because I have a very established and old kingdom, but I'm a new king. I would like to have the experience of someone who's been on the throne for 50 years or maybe even 100 years, because you and I both know that as we live through life, how many times have you said to yourself, if I knew then what I know now, right? I know I say that all the time. If I knew then what I know now, the reality is as we go through life, as we play this game, we start realizing some small tweaks that we could have made over time that would have snowballed in a very positive way over time, that we recognize that if we started investing in our 20s, that we could have retired in our 40s. We realized that that one person was not a good friend for us and we wasted so much time in that relationship. We realized certain dynamics with work in our career. There are so many things that as we live through, we gain this wisdom and we share it with others. You want to listen to that wisdom. Allow that wisdom to become a part of your retirement life. Whether you have friends that have already retired, whether you get back in touch with yourself and understanding the things that you enjoyed, you really want to think deeply about the experiences that you have had and how that could impact positively the retirement that you're going to go to. The reality is there is benefit by talking to someone who has retired before, by talking to a professional or an advisor that has helped people retire, because they learn just like we all learn through experience. Number two on our list, we have not planning for inflation. So when it comes to inflation, I think high level, we understand, all right, well, inflation does happen. The price of things go up. I know that the price of eggs was like $10 a carton. And I know the price of eggs in maybe 2000 was maybe 80 cents a carton, maybe $1.20 a carton. So the price of eggs has gone up. If you have not planned for that in your retirement, someone who retired in 2000 and was able to afford their eggs are not able to afford eggs in 2025. And that's not unreasonable for someone to be retired for 25 years. When you look at the price of things going up, there's a couple of ways that our economy very creatively comes up with a way to hide inflation. One of them is called shrinkflation. It's a very fancy way of saying that there is a size that we normally have gotten this item and the size is smaller now. The price is the same, but we're getting a much smaller amount of that good. That is an impact of inflation. It technically means that the price for me to get more has gone up. If you look at places like the dollar store or Dollar General, the Dollar Tree, I mean, you kind of get the idea. All those places at some point in time used to have all their items for $1. How much do you have to pay for those items now? And you recognize that that is a significant increase. And even when I'm looking at the data and the market and different things, you can see that there is an impact, even from a policy perspective, where these tariffs, there are some companies that are passing the tariffs along. Now, with all costs, there are some companies that can't. And we can see that businesses have filed for bankruptcy at a much higher rate over the past month. Well, why is that? Because they couldn't pass on the cost. But if you did have a business that could pass on the cost, then you will. And sometimes it's just that simple, right? If I had a business and all of a sudden I was building houses and it used to cost me $50,000 to build a house, well, I'd be okay selling you the house for $100,000. But if it costs me $100,000 to build a house, I have to sell the house for more, otherwise my business doesn't exist. So when you think of it from the perspective of the cost of goods being sold, then we know that people get raises every 3 years, so my labor costs more. We know that from a policy perspective, that tariffs and other restrictions could cause my prices to go up. And we also know that there are just some businesses that maybe restructure their company in some way, or they just want to increase their margin, that there's a lot of reasons that prices go up. All of that is inside of inflation. The numbers show that about every 17 to 20 years, the price of an item doubles. And that is with a normal inflation rate of about 3%, which means that if you retire today and it costs you $50,000 to fund your retirement lifestyle, in 20 years, you would need $100,000 to fund the exact same lifestyle, assuming that inflation is 3% every single year. Well, if we are investing in a way, which we'll get into a little bit later, that at least keeps up with inflation, i.e., if inflation on average is 3%, my investment should return on average 3% if I want to just keep up with inflation. If I want to beat inflation, then I need to have a return higher than 3%. If inflation is higher than 3%, then it means I need a return to at least match that inflation, at least in the short term. Well, if it is over a small period of time, then we can probably hold off on raising our returns. But if inflation is higher than 3% over an extended period of time, then I would strongly consider whether or not it makes sense for me to review my asset allocation. If I built it in a way to just keep up with inflation, I have relatively conservative, safe investments. Then if inflation goes to 5%, I may have to revisit. I may be okay. My other investments may have gone up if they're tied to inflation, which we'll go into a little bit later. But if they're not, then it means that I would need to explore things that outpace inflation. And that's normally going to be things like real estate, the stock market, or your own personal business, which could be consulting or a brick and mortar on the corner of the neighborhood. It could be really anything like that. Number three on our list is failing to define and stick to a budget. I know that this one is not the sexy one, that a lot of people are like, Dre, budgets are so restricting. But I have found that ideally, we just want to know how much things cost. And when you have an idea of how much your life costs, that's all we're really talking about. How much does my lifestyle cost? You get to make the budget and you get to update the budget. Whatever your goals are, if you say, hey, I'm going to get this golf membership and it costs $7,000 a year, boom, put that in the plan. How long do you think you'll golf? You could save the rest of my retirement. You could say 10 years. But if it's 10 years, then we'll say, all right, well, $7,000 a year times 10 years, that's $70,000. And then we add in inflation, assuming that maybe the price will go up of the membership. But if it doesn't, then all good. It's just $70,000. Do we have that set aside in our retirement account? Do we have the income to cover this expense? If I want to go gardening or traveling or join a yoga club or pickleball, whatever it looks like, how much does that lifestyle cost? It's not just how much does my electric bill, my water bill cost. Of course, we do need to count that. How much my food costs. Of course, we need to count groceries as well. Whether I have a rent or mortgage and my credit cards and my car payment, yes, all those things do go into a budget. But we're also talking about the fact that, yeah, whatever your retirement lifestyle is, we need to just know how much that costs, and we need to be able to have some sort of an investment allocation that covers that. Because your withdrawal rate, how you take the money out, that determines the income that you have. We have a bag of money on this side, and then we have to turn that bag of money into an income for the rest of our retirement. And there are a handful of withdrawal strategies. You all know that one of my favorite withdrawal strategies is the three bucket strategy because it's a very dynamic strategy. You have a portion of allocations that are safe, and that's going to be like my cash and CDs, cash equivalent is what we call. And that's normally your living expenses. That's 1 to 3 years. And then in the middle, we have our income producing assets. These are going to be a little bit riskier than safe investments, but they're not going to be as aggressive as some of the growth investments. It's right there in the middle. And I would expect to get around inflation for those investments. And so that could be bonds, it could be preferred dividend paying companies, it could be some value companies if you want in there. You're going to be talking about like your annuities and different things like that, relatively safe investments. And then your growth bucket, that is the bucket where we are trying to outpace inflation. That is where our real estate and our individual stocks and our ETFs and commodities, if you're into gold and precious metals, those could be there as well. If you're in crypto or Bitcoin, that would be in your aggressive bucket. And the idea is if I have 1 to 3 years of living expenses in my safe bucket, that gives my income producing bucket enough time to recover from any market downturns. That also gives me enough time for my growth bucket to recover. When you think about things like 9/11, the recession that we had with that, the Great Recession, obviously the recession we had with that, or even COVID and the recession that we had with that, you know that it was 1 to 3 years. And that's the idea of the safe bucket. If I can leave my money in the market to recover, I should be okay because the market does tend to recover, historically speaking. That whatever the event is, eventually we make policy changes or the event passes and then the market starts to recover, right? That's the idea. But the issue that most people have is they don't have a withdrawal strategy that allows them to live off of something else. So they have to take the money out while the market is taking money out, because that's technically what the market losing value is. That's almost like the market is withdrawing from your investment accounts, and then you're withdrawing from your investment accounts. And then you can see why that could lead to someone running out of money much quicker than they originally thought. That leads us very nicely into number 4 on the list, which is relying too much on one single income. So you all know that I'm also a big fan of having multiple streams of income. The numbers show that 65% of self-made millionaires have at least 3 streams of income. And when you think about that, like just thinking about filling up a bucket where you have one faucet going or you can have 3 faucets going, I think we would agree that 3 faucets fill up the bucket quickest. Well, the bucket is your retirement funds. And when you're looking at your retirement, if you have, and I think the IRS says that they recognize 7 streams of income, if you have 3 that are filling up your bucket, you'll find it very difficult to not generate $1 million, because if you took your earned income and then you invested in investment income, which is dividend income, so that's going to be one income stream, and then you invested in real estate, you have rental income, well, that's another income stream. If you had those 3 streams for the rest of your life, could you see yourself being able to fill your bucket up? And I would say yes. Now, what we like to do, and it sort of was teased in the 3 bucket strategy, is when we have income streams, there's different taxes on them, there's different risk on them. And so we normally want to adjust our income streams in a way that I can have income flowing in from some source that is not impacted negatively by market events. So that could be your CDs. Well, your CDs is interest income. So that's a certain amount of money that they agree to pay you. Your car payment is you paying interest income. Your mortgage payment is you paying interest income. That is the interest that's charged on a loan. So if you loan your money out, you get paid the interest charged on the loan. It also, as we did mention the real estate, but you can have a business, so it could be profits from the business. And that is just normally going to be what's left over after you get your revenue and you subtract your expenses. Well, that's an income stream. Inside your business, if you wrote a book, well, that's a royalty. You go to Amazon and you give them your book, and then they pay your royalty every time your book is sold. If you were a singer and you sung and put your music on Spotify, every time someone spins at Spotify, you get paid a royalty from that. So you have that income stream as well. You could also have capital gains. That's when you sell your stocks, or it could be real estate as well after a year in a day. And you can start seeing how if I have certain streams of income, that it becomes very difficult for me to not have enough money to fund my retirement. The numbers show that about a quarter of retirees, 25%, say that they rely solely on Social Security as their income in retirement. Well, if you go to the Social Security website itself, it will tell you that we're only going to pay on average about a third of your earned income over your life. So we don't want you to rely solely on Social Security. And then when you look at things like the tax revenue that is being generated and the tax cuts and I think we added another $3 trillion on the debt. And that is a big assumption because we're assuming that the measures to reduce the debt later are going to actually be kept on the books. And so what I'm saying is they normally will pass and it'll say, hey, over the next 10 years, we're going to cut X amount out of the budget. You're like, all right, cool, whatever. They're like, all right, well, we're going to do the tax cuts today. And you're like, and they said, and we'll phase the reductions over the next 10 years. And you're like, well, wait a minute, what happens if a new Congress gets elected and they just cancel the reductions? And they're like, well, yeah, that's what pretty much happens most of the time, which is why we have $40 trillion in debt, because we say, we'll do the cuts today, we'll do the reductions tomorrow, but tomorrow never comes. And because of that fact, that is one of the reasons that they say Social Security is going to go bankrupt. And not in the sense that it won't have any money, but in the sense that it no longer has the extra money. So right now, Social Security generates about 70% of what someone's Social Security benefits would be. And so they say, it's on the website, that, hey, we're probably going to run out of money within the next like 10 years. And if that happens, we're only going to give you 70% of what is promised. So if we promised you $1,000 a month, we're only going to give you $700 a month. If we promised you $2,000 a month, we're only going to give you $1,400 a month. If we promise you $3,000 a month, we're only going to give you $2,100 a month. So you can see how that 30% cut is kind of steep, which is why it's so important that we build a plan that doesn't rely solely on any one stream of income, that we want to be diversified, not only from a risk perspective in the sense of what's the chance of me losing money from my investment, but from a policy perspective, from a tax perspective, from all sorts of issues and risk. And that's why I do a lot of stress testing with our retirement plan, because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if I'm going to live longer. So what happens if I do live 10 years longer? We don't know if taxes go up 5%. What happens if taxes go up 5%? Did I adjust my income streams in a way where I have tax-free income so it doesn't matter? Or does all my income inside of my 401k so it matters a lot? Then you can see why it becomes something that you really want to think about. And so that's why it's best to have it diversified in a way where you're not solely focused on any one income stream. Number 5 on our list is letting emotions drive our investment strategy. And all we're really saying is when I'm investing money in the market, that the market goes up and down, that things happen. And if the market is going down, a lot of people feel like, oh, ooh, I feel heartburn, I feel anxious, I don't know, I can't sleep at night, I need to sell everything. Well, we've technically sold low, right? Like, so whatever the prices we bought it at was higher, and then the stock started tanking, so we sold it there. Well, if you buy high and sell low, you can see how that is not a winning strategy. The reality is I need to have an investment strategy that removes emotion, and rebalancing is that approach. And so the idea is I choose an asset allocation that works for me. And there are hundreds of them, but you could do the permanent portfolio, which is like, hey, I have a fourth of my investments in gold, I have a fourth of my investments in the stock market, I have a fourth of my investments in cash, and I have a fourth of my investments in treasuries. All right, cool. I know that at any given economic climate, one of those four is not going to perform as well as it normally does, right? I just know that because that's how the economic climates are. If the stock market is performing well, that means we're in a time of economic growth, which means that gold is probably not performing well, cash is probably not performing well, but you're okay with that because you have 25% of your allocations in each of those buckets. Well, what happens when the market isn't doing well? Well, generally speaking, if the market is not doing well, that probably means that interest rates are up, that we're kind of in a rough environment. If we're sort of in a rough environment, that may mean that another one of my three quadrants is doing much better. Maybe interest rates are up, and that is part of things that's driving us down into the recession because we were coming from super high inflation and a bunch of economic growth and everything was kind of crazy. Well, that means that the 25% of my bucket that is in long-term bonds, that is doing really well because interest rates are up. So that portion is outperforming the stock market, right? Like that's reasonable. If we have high inflation, which just means that your money is not worth anything, well, then gold is probably performing well in that environment. If you have deflation, which is my money is so valuable, well, that means that gold's not performing well and your cash is. You can see how all we're going to do is anytime any one of those four quadrants is performing super well. So my asset allocation was supposed to be 25% of each of them. And so if cash is performing really well, and that goes up to 40%, where 40% of my allocation is now in cash because it's been performing really well, or maybe everything else has been performing really poorly. Well, I noticed that maybe that means that my gold is not performing really well. I would then sell 15% of my cash allocation to get it back to 25%. And then I would buy 15% in gold to get gold back to 25% from 10%. That's all rebalancing is. It removes the emotion. And when you remove the emotion, what are we basically doing? Well, what we're doing is we're saying cash is outperforming the allocation to 25%, which means what? It means I'm selling high. And that means that gold is not performing well in the same market. And so what does that mean when I buy the gold? It means I'm buying low, which is basically what we're all trying to do. Well, that's how you do it. If you're trying to buy low and sell high, the only way to do that is to buy something when it is not performing very well. Otherwise, you'll be doing what most emotional investors do, which is buy high, like GameStop and all those meme stocks, and then they sell low because they're freaking out and it's starting to drop. And that is not going to be a long-term strategy. And it definitely would be a mistake that could cause someone to run out of money early in retirement. 6 on our list is not adjusting investments for retirement. And all we're saying is that when I'm younger, there's a certain amount of risk I'm going to take on because I have a longer time horizon. I'm not going to touch my investments for 10 years plus. If I'm not going to touch my investments for 10 years plus, I can be pretty risky because there's not many investments that are just bad for 10 years straight. They may be bad for 2 years, they may be bad for 5 years, but 10 years straight is a really long time. So we can be a little bit more aggressive. But if you are 5 years from retiring and you still have your allocation set in a way that's as if you weren't going to retire for 20 years, well, you don't actually have the time to allow your stocks, to allow your real estate, to allow your business to recover. And so normally what we do is we start locking in some of those wins as we get closer to retirement. There's a lot of ways that you can do this. One of those approaches is you basically take your age, and that is the percentage of your allocation that you're going to have in cash. And when I say cash, it doesn't literally have to be cash. It could be in like bonds, but it's the idea that I took it out of the market. And so the way it would work is, let's say I'm 20, so I have 80% of my investments allocated aggressively, and I have 20% allocated relatively conservatively in preservation, where I've locked in those wins, right? So if I'm 50, then I'll have 50% of my investments in that safe, locked in, preserved mode. And then I have 50% of my investments in the market or in my business or in real estate allocated in a way that's relatively aggressive. When I'm 70 years old, I would have 70% of my money locked in, safe, and preserved, and I have 30% that's still invested aggressively. Now you can see as you get older that the numbers don't quite work out, right? Like if I'm 80, does that mean 80% of my money should be out of the market, out of real estate, and out of those? Well, I would say no, because you still want to keep up with inflation. But it is a simple approach to just let you quick and dirty be able to say, yeah, I'm invested a little aggressively for my age. Now it's more of a range, so it's not that you have to be hard and fast at any one of these, but it is to let me know, well, if I am 60 years old and I have 30% of my money safe and 70% still invested aggressively, I may want to at least get to like a 50-50. Now, I do lean on using the three bucket strategy because I find that that works very well. But even in the three bucket strategy, we would change the asset allocation in three buckets, where if you're younger, maybe we have 60% of your money that is in the aggressive bucket, and then 20% in the income producing bucket, and then 20% in the cash bucket. And then as we get older, you may have 40% in the aggressive bucket, and then you may find yourself with 30% in the income bucket and 30% in the cash bucket. There are so many ways that we get adjusted, but you see how we would adjust the three buckets as we get older and closer to retirement. You don't want to be someone who finds yourself retiring and then you take this loss that first year, right? You'll find stories where people are like, I was about to retire and then the Great Recession happened and I lost 60% of my retirement funds. You should not have had so much of your retirement exposed in the market to where you can lose 60% of your retirement fund within a couple of years of retirement. We should have been able to start moving some of those chains in the allocation so that you could be in a much safer asset allocation. So that way, if something did happen, you still have the majority of your retirement fund set aside, and then you still have the time to allow that portion to recover while you live off of your safe bucket and your moderate bucket. Number 7 on our list is overpaying in taxes. And the way that we normally work, and I've worked with a variety of people, a lot of times what happens is twofold. Is one is we all have a role. So there is a CPA and their function, there's a financial planner and their function. The CPA's job is to give you the lowest taxes today. And that's generally what they do, and they're really good at that. And they'll do that every single year. Whatever your situation is, they'll give you the best approach for that year based on that situation. As a certified financial planner, I typically lean a little bit more on the income, and I'm trying to make sure you have an income in the future for retirement. So I might sit there and talk to you, and I might say, hey, we should take some taxes today so that way you don't have them in 10 years in your retirement. Well, that is normally going to be the opposite of what the CPA is saying, right? Not to say that all of them are like that. I've talked to many that are different, but I've talked to a lot that their measurement, right? How you measure the effectiveness of your CPA is normally, are you going to save me more taxes than like TurboTax, right? Like let's just be real. So they're trying to lower your tax burden today. I would might say, well, in 10 years, you will have required minimum distributions in your 401k. So I think that we should take a little bit more taxes and do some Roth conversions now, but that way you'll have tax-free income in retirement. You'll have more income in retirement. You won't have the required minimum distributions. But that's how you measure me. You measure me by how much income I create for you and how efficiently I can design your retirement plan. So we're all measured a little differently. That's why sometimes us being together makes the best approach for all of us. Where it's like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. And they're like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. And then you're able to say, okay, I recognize that I have to make this decision. The way I would describe it is almost as if you were setting a New Year's resolution. If you set contradicting New Year's resolutions, it makes it hard. So for example, I remember there was one year I said, I'm going to get out of debt. I'm gonna lower my expenses, but also I'm gonna eat healthier. Well, for me to allocate the money towards eating healthier, that is going to take away from the allocation of money towards getting out of debt. I might be able to do both, but I should recognize that they're contradicting goals. that if I wanted to decrease how much I spend on certain things to lower my debt, going healthier is going to increase how much I spend on food. I think we would probably agree with that. And so many times it becomes important for us to recognize whether our goals are working together or working against each other. If they're working against each other, that's okay. We just need to put them in order of priority. And so we're talking about Roth conversions. All we're basically saying is if I know that the money in my 401k or my 403b or my other pre-tax accounts are going to be taxed as ordinary income in retirement, when I stop working, but before I start Social Security, I maybe could start doing some of these Roth conversions. Maybe I could find a way where every year that my taxes are lower than what they normally are. So let's say my taxes are normally 20%. And then any year that's 10%, I do a Roth conversion to bring my taxes back up to the normal 20%. But now I find myself able to have more tax-free income. I don't take that 10% savings today. I give it to my future self in retirement. And you can use this strategy even when it comes to things like Medicare and whether you'll have IRMA, where it moves up how much your monthly premiums are for your Medicare Part B and your Medicare Part D. We just want to be thinking ahead of time where if this is what I'm going to be doing, how do I need to be moving the cards around to make sure I get the most favorable result for me and my long-term retirement plan versus just taking that tax break today, but it costs me a lot more in the future. Number 8 on our list is overlooking your retirement goals. When we're talking about your retirement goals, it's like, hey, what am I going to do with my time in retirement? A lot of time we're just planning the money. We're like, hey, I'm going to get my money right. I'm going to make sure I have my tax strategy in place and I'm going to be rainbows and skittles, living my best life. But what are you going to do with your time? And you'll find that some people they're bored, they start drifting, and they're like, man, I should just go back to work because they never had all of their time in their control. They had kids that they were running after, they had projects at work, there's always a fire drill every single day. And then when you retire, you have all of your time and you're sitting there, you're like, well, what am I going to do with it? And you have to really spend some time getting in touch with yourself. I'm someone who likes the idea of just sitting down and just writing out like 20 goals. I know that feels like a lot, but I like 20 because if I just have you do 5, you're going to do whatever the squeaky wheels are, the most stressful things in your life. That's going to be your first goals. But when you get up to like 15 to 20, you really start thinking and you're like, oh yeah, I did like doing that as a kid, or oh yeah, I did always want to go there and do that. And I just forgot about it. And so I like the idea of 20. And the only thing they have to do, whatever, honestly, whatever the number is, you don't really have to worry about it. But one of the things that I do think is very beneficial is for when you sit there and you check off something on your goal list, is to add something new. As we live, we gain new experiences, we try new things, and then we have new goals to match our new self. And if you recognize that, then allow yourself the ability to add something with your new self, whether that's new friends and new events, however that looks, just add something with your new self. And so I like the idea of anytime I start checking things off my list, I add some things to my list. And when you're thinking about goals, it could be where you want to go, who do you want to be with, people you want to meet, things you want to try or learn or experience, anything like that. We'll list that in our goals and then we'll plan out our retirement so that we're maximizing our time and that we're really enjoying ourselves. Because there are people who retire and they just don't feel as good as they thought they would. Because our happiness, I'm someone that believes your happiness is tied to your time. How you spend your time determines how happy you are. And so if you spend your time doing things that bring you pleasure, bring you purpose, bring you fulfillment, then that is going to have a positive impact on your retirement. If you spend your time and you miss that, then it doesn't work as much. And while many times I talk about the 3 buckets from an investment perspective, there's 3 buckets from a time perspective as well. And normally it's the 3 C's. So you spend your time on contribution. That is the things that I do. It could be mentorship. It could be working as a consultant. It could be any of those things where I'm contributing to society and the economy in some beneficial way. And then normally it's going to be community. Who do you want to hang out with? The people that I like to talk to, family, friends, all that stuff, clubs that I may join, and then challenges. What am I going to do to push myself? What is something that I've always wanted to do? Learn a language, run a marathon, learn how to do a triathlon. It could be any of that stuff. But what are something that maybe you're like, I want to challenge myself. I want to do that. Where I like when my wife, she has a master's in accounting. I think it's like a master's in accountancy. I think they call it accountancy. And one of the cool things that they did is they shared who the youngest person was to get a degree that day. I think that person was maybe like 13 or something. And the oldest person to get a degree that day. And I think that person was like 78 or something. I just think that's pretty cool. You're never too young and you're never too old. Just whatever the goal is, let's put a plan together and let's accomplish it. Number 9 on our list is claiming Social Security too early. So we're all a little bit different. So when you claim Social Security, there's a lot of things that you want to think about. You want to think about whether or not, and I'll put a link to another video where you can see that, but you want to think about my health, right? Because for the math to work, just the math now, if I wait till 70, then I'm basically saying that I plan on being here from like around 80 to 82. Like I would need to live that long for just to break even. Because we're basically saying that I'm not taking the money at 60. And if I did take the money at 60 and receive that money every single year, how long would it take for that increased amount to catch up to that? And that's normally going to be about 10 to 12 years. And so from a health perspective, that's the first thing. But then there's an income bridge, which is, hey, how am I going to fund my retirement if I don't take Social Security early? If you're still working, then that's another reason that many would say, well, I don't need to take it now. I can allow it to keep growing because I'm working anyways. There are so many factors that go into choosing when makes the most sense for you to take Social Security that there's literally like 700 different scenarios that we can run through. But for the most part, those are kind of the quick and easy questions that you want to think about. Do I need the money now? And if I do, then I should probably take Social Security. If I don't, then I ask the next question. How healthy am I? What's my family history? Do we have a family where everybody lives at 200 years old? Or do you have a family where everybody died yesterday? And then based off of that, we would say, all right, well, then I feel pretty healthy. I have the income. I think I'm okay with that. And if that was all check off, then you would say, all right, well, then what age do I want to be able to do it? Can I wait till full Social Security age, which is going to be 67 for most of you? Or should I wait till 70 and get the maximum amount where I get a little bit extra? What about my spouse and their benefits? Because what sometimes happens if our retirement plan is based off of two income streams, and then something happens to the one, does that income stream go away? Do they have a pension and it goes away? Do they have Social Security and that goes away? What do I do? So sometimes what we'll do is we'll have the person with a smaller amount and they'll start at 62, and then the person with the large amount and they'll wait till 70. And the idea is twofold. Is one is if something happens to the smaller amount person, the person with the larger amount, they got the largest amount. So they're probably going to be able to maintain their same lifestyle with the larger amount by themselves. If something happens to the larger amount person, then the smaller amount person is able to upgrade their Social Security benefit to the larger amount person. You get half of what they received. And sometimes that is enough for the smaller amount person to be able to have enough money so that they can maintain the same lifestyle as well. Like I said, and you can sort of see there's a lot that goes into choosing Social Security, but you do want to make sure you're thinking about that. And you don't want to take it too early if that's not the best approach for you and your retirement goals. And the 10th and final mistake on our list is underestimating healthcare costs. So when you're talking about healthcare costs, it's already, there's lots of numbers out there, whether we're talking about long-term care, which on average is 3 years of someone's retirement, and it's on average about $60,000 a year. So that's about $200,000 by itself for long-term care, just going to the doctor, getting the checkups, things like that. You then have your Medicare, your co-pays and premiums, where we're thinking, well, I have Medicare, Medicare lowers the cost of my doctors. Well, depending on what the copay is, that could be a lot of money. And the numbers show that is roughly around $150,000 to $200,000 for a single person over the life of their retirement for healthcare expenses. And if you're a couple, it just doubles. So then it's somewhere around $300,000 to $400,000 over the life of your retirement for a couple on healthcare expenses. And you can see that we have a big problem with our healthcare system. And it's largely because most people are unaware of how much their doctors are charging their insurance, but because they only pay the copay, which maybe is like $100 or something, they're not super concerned about it. But the reality is next January, when you get your new insurance premiums, they do what? They go up. Do they go up with inflation or more than inflation? Yeah, a lot more than inflation. On average, our healthcare expenses go up twice the amount of inflation. It's on average 6% every single year. So if your healthcare expenses are going up by that significant of an amount every single year, it's because the insurance company is being billed a significant amount. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that that's only it because they make a lot of money. When you read about the profits of insurance companies, they are definitely charging more than what their new costs are, right? Like we're acknowledging that. But what I am saying is that a part of that expense is the fact that you're paying a $100 copay and then the doctor's office charges them $2,000. And whether or not that's the cost, they have a staff and everything else, that's not really what we're trying to decide today. What we're simply saying is if you were a cash patient, I've done that. I've been there. When I first started my business, I got rid of my health insurance because it was so expensive. Not to say that I would do that again, but that's what I did then because that was the only way to make the money match. You know, you have more month than money sometimes. So I got rid of my healthcare expenses for the 1 year. And I remember all of the fees went down a lot when you're a cash patient, where I went in for an MRI and they said it'll be $4,000 here. And I said, well, I don't have insurance. And they said, okay, well, here's an address. Go to this clinic. It's about 20 minutes down. They will charge you 400, right? So it went from 4,000 to 400. And they said, and they'll give you a disc, bring the disc back here, we'll upload it, and then we'll review it with you. Okay, right? So it literally went from 4,000 to $400. That was also the case when I went to get my knee surgery, where they said, all right, it'll be $40,000. And so, oh, I'm a cash patient. And she had a big old thick book. It was a binder, and she's like flipping through it. And she's like, all right, the cash patient page. And she said, okay, for a cash patient, it's about $3,000. And I said, wait a minute, you just said it was $40,000. And she said, yeah, for a cash patient, it's $3,000. And if you don't believe me, I would say try it. Go somewhere, tell me you're a cash patient, and see how it changes the price. And you can see the way the system is set up and how expensive healthcare is, how that is definitely something that you have to be thinking about in retirement, because healthcare easily could be something that blows a hole in our retirement plan and cause us to run out of money. Inflation is definitely something that could blow a hole in our retirement plan and cause us to run out of money. Our withdrawal strategy could blow a hole in our retirement plan and cause us to run out of money sooner than we expected. You can see that our risk protection, everything is a part of the retirement plan. None of these things are big by themselves, but over the span of 10, 20, 30 years, these small little leaks in the bucket, we end up with a bucket without any water inside of it by the end of our retirement. If you're interested in grabbing your own copy of the 10 biggest retirement mistakes and how to avoid them, if you want to be able to see a step-by-step approach, I share that with you. All you need to do is go to happilyretire.com. I'll put a link in the show notes as well for you. You sign up for free, I'll give you the retirement roadmap, and it goes through 10 wisdom principles to help you make wise decisions through times of uncertainty. And that's free, and I'll give it to you. Don't even worry about it. It'll help you set up your retirement. If you're already retired, it'll help you stay retired without running out of money too soon. Then you'll be able to put the pieces in place because, as we already know, wisdom is the experience, but I don't necessarily want the experience from my own mistakes. I would like the experience sometimes for other people's mistakes. And if you found value in this video, I simply ask for you to like and subscribe so you can continue receiving valuable insights on how to create your own wealthy retirement system. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy life.